28 Classic has come out to ride, wins the letter from and so Lester Piggott, the world's greatest jockey, has achieved his lifetime ambition by winning his 28th Classic as the record holder of all time.
Every flat racing season produces its galaxy of stars. Some shine all too briefly. Others happily retain their sparkle for years. But when the brightest of them all disappears, he leaves an irreplaceable void in the constellation. So it is in 1986, without the perennial maestro, Lester Piggott. Since his retirement from the saddle, millions of words have been written about the man whose talents have thrilled multi-millions throughout the world. Now, thanks to sponsorship by Terry Ramsden and Glenn International, we can relive a feature of a remarkable career, his record 29 classic triumphs. Here at Newmarket, Lester has spent the greater part of his racing life, but it was at Haydock that he rode his first winner as a 12-year-old in 1948, and at Epsom, where he achieved his first classic triumph, when at 18 he became the youngest rider ever to win the Derby, partnering Never Say Die. There were 22 runners in the 1954 Derby, and Lester had been engaged by the veteran Joe Lawson to ride the chestnut colt Never Say Die. One victory from 9 races seemed improbable credentials for a potential classic winner, and his starting price of 33-1 was a fair reflection of his chance.
And they're off. A rather small field of 22 begins its gallop of 1.5 miles over the switchback course. Uphill first, with Moonlight Express taking an early lead. Then, approaching Tottenham Corner, Rouston Manor thrilled his many backers by going to the front. There wasn't much in it, though, and Lavengro was disputing the lead, while Alpenhorn, Blue Rod, Never Say Die, Darius and Lando were all within striking distance. Rounding the corner, Rouston Manor was showing the way, with Lando and Darius moving up. Never Say Die and Elopement were also going well near the leaders. Downhill at a cracking pace with the issue still absolutely open. Then in the straight run for home, Never Say Die began to draw away from Darius on the rails. Yes, this is where the derbies are usually won or lost. And now, with Never Say Die looking a clear winner, Arabian Night makes a bid for glory. He's overhauling Darius with every stride, but he can't get up to Never Say Die, who maintains his 2-length lead right to the finish. A grand win from Arabian Night and Darius by this 33-1 long shot.
Lester had ridden a perfect race to win his first classic, but 2 weeks later, riding the same horse in the King Edward VII Stakes at Royal Ascot, the 18-year-old was involved in one of racing's roughest races, which led to the withdrawal of his license and the loss of a winning ride on Never Say Die in the St. Leger. One of the jockeys involved in the Ascot race was Sir Gordon Richards, and after he suffered a nasty accident at Sandown in July of the following year, he decided that the brilliant career which had brought him 26 championships and 4,870 winning rides was over. It was Lester who was chosen to replace Sir Gordon as stable jockey to the Newmarket trainer Sir Noel Merlis. The association between Sir Noel and Lester, which would last for 12 years, was one of racing's most outstandingly successful. Their first major success came in 1957 with a chestnut colt of outstanding ability, Crepello. Without doubt, Crepello was brilliant, but his brittle forelegs made it very difficult to keep him sound. Expertly handled by Sir Noel on the Newmarket gallops, Lester's role was equally crucial on the racecourse, as one of Noel's key men, Clive Brittain, recalls.
He's got this knack of holding horses together and making everything appear easy to them, you know. And he kept the weight off the forelegs and did do more than any jockey that's still riding, you know. So I would say another jockey could well have broken Crepello down before the Derby, or certainly in the Derby. But Lester only allowed the horse to do just what he had to win. And Crepello was certainly the best colt I think I'd ever seen.
On his seasonal debut, Crepello, with Lester aboard, won the 2,000 guineas by half a length, a margin of victory that could have been much more had Crepello been given a hard race. His next race was the Derby, where he started a warm favourite at 6-4. Among other runners was an interesting representative from Ireland, Ballymoss, Vincent O'Brien's first runner in an English classic.
Half-mile switchback course. Mystic Prince was nosing in front, but that didn't mean a thing at this stage. Presently, when they'd settled down, Eudemon led from Mystic Prince, Chavastrid, Brioche and Hedonist, with the favourite lying sixth and going easily. Lester Piggott, in fact, kept Crepello in that position right round towards Tattenham Corner, and there was very little change in the order of the leaders. Round the corner, Brioche was fighting it out in front with Ballymoss, and Tempest and Pipe of Peace close up. This is the moment when things begin to happen in the Derby. Ballymoss took the lead in the straight and was holding on well when the favourite challenged. Now we can see Piggott in hooped shirt bringing Crepello through in the centre. Galloping on strongly, Crepello had Ballymoss beaten, and he goes on to win the 178th Derby in true classic style.
A decisive victory, and Crepello's last race, for he was withdrawn from the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Stakes at the final hour, and soon afterwards broke down in training. 2 days after Crepello's victory, Lester lined up for the Oaks on the Queen's filly Carrozza. Her Majesty was doubly represented in the race, and it was her other runner, Mulberry Harbour, trained by Sir Cecil Boyd Rochford, who wore the first colours. Favourite was the French-trained Guineas winner Rose Royal, with Ireland's principal hope, Silken Glider, ridden by Pat Edery's father, Jimmy.
Then the field of 11 fillies were off on their 1.5-mile journey, with neither of the Queen's runners showing prominently in the early stages. It was in the run home that the big thrill came. Carrozza was in the lead and apparently on the way to victory. Then coming up on the outside with a late sprint, Silken Glider made a tremendous bid. Could Carrozza hold on? It was neck and neck in a terrific duel, right to the post and a photo finish.
The immediate reaction from the betting ring was that Her Majesty had been denied a first classic victory. But, as he would prove so often, there was no one better than Lester in a close finish.
No doubt it's in my mind that Lester won the Oaks on the filly, you know, not the filly winning the Oaks, because she was an easy filly. In fairness to her, she had tremendous courage, and Lester knew this, and he set about her, and if you look at the tape now, he appears to be hitting her quite a lot, but he never actually hit her. That filly came back and she was hardly marked at all, and if Lester had hit one and really hit it, it stayed marked for a month, you know. But he put one of his most strongest finishes that I think he ever performed on that filly that day. That certainly was an Oaks that never should have been won, you know.
1957 was a great year for Lester and his employer, Sir Noel Merlis, who became the first trainer to break the £100,000 barrier for prize money won in a single season. Now, nearly 30 years later, that record remains at Warren Place, where Henry Cecil lately broke the £1 million barrier. 2 years on, and Sir Noel had another brilliant filly in his yard, Petite Étoile. At the beginning of the 1959 season, she was one of many good fillies in the yard, and for once, Lester's great skill at selecting the best horse for the big occasion was off course. Or was it?
I think the lads put one over on Lester that day. They all thought Petite Étoile was the best, and Lester, in his usual way, sort of, what do you think of this, what do you think of that, having this quiz round. Apparently it upset one of the lads, and he didn't give him the right advice at all, you know.
For the 1,000 guineas of 1959, Lester chose Sir Victor Sassoon's Colyria, but she finished well behind Petite Étoile, who won by a length from Rosalba. In the Oaks, given the same choice, Lester made no mistake, and Petite Étoile laid further foundation to the belief that she was one of the very best post-war fillies, winning the Epsom Classic by 3 lengths and a canter. It was in 1960 that Lester became champion jockey for the first time with 170 winners, and he also won 2 classics with a horse called Saint Paddy, owned by Sir Victor Sassoon.
Saint Paddy was a good horse, but he wasn't an outstanding champion like Capello was, you know. But he was a good horse, and again, he was a horse that pulled terribly hard, and Saint Paddy needed a Lester Piggott to ride him because he ran in panicky spurts, and Lester could control this panic and put it into action, and he made the horse confident in his races.
Unplaced in the Guineas, Saint Paddy went to the Derby after a victory in the Mercer Stakes. Attention on the 1960 Derby was greater than ever before, with TV cameras in attendance for the very first time, and it was the French-trained favourite Angers who received most of the attention. Sadly, his race ended in tragedy when he broke a leg on the descent to Tattenham Corner.
They're off, a mile and a half to go, the smallest field under 17 since Pearl Diver showed his heels to 14 in 1947. Port St Anne was first to nose in front with Tudor Period, Oak Ridge, Marengo and Die Hard close up. The head-on view of the galloping field shows just how thrilling a ride in the Derby must be, how tricky at times too. Up to Tattenham Corner it was Roy, Marengo, Saint Paddy, Kithnos and Taliatus. Round the corner and into the straight, Die Hard, Roy, Kithnos, Saint Paddy and Alcius. Die Hard and Roy were fighting it out when Lester Piggott brought Saint Paddy along with an all-conquering run. He's third from the rails, and now with Alcius and Kithnos in pursuit, Saint Paddy made certain of victory. Lester's reported as saying that this was the easiest Derby win he'd had, and he'd had 2 before.
Sir Winston Churchill's fancied runner, Vienna, had been withdrawn from the Derby at the last minute because of a pricked foot, but he appeared to have a better chance of winning a classic when he reopposed Saint Paddy in the St Leger.
Saint Paddy really was a better mile and a quarter horse probably than anything else, although he won the St Leger, only because he didn't have a turn of foot. He was a galloper, but in top gear could run the legs off of most horses, you know, at a mile and a quarter up to a mile and a half. Now for Lester to hold that horse together and nurse him long enough to win the St Leger was another tremendous job, you know.
The following season, Lester returned to Doncaster to ride Aurelius. Aurelius's principal rivals were Just Great, who had beaten him in the Great Voltigeur Stakes, and the French-trained Dicta Drake, who was made favourite. It was a day when everything went right for Lester. Just Great was left at the start, and then, through inexperience of the opposition, the French jockey Max Garcia found himself in the lead far too early when Aurelius's pacemaker dropped out, so Lester was able to pounce just when he pleased and won by 3/4 of a length from Bounteous with Dicta Drake third. This was Lester's 8th classic winner, but it would be another 5 years before he rode his next. During that time, in 1964, he won the first of 8 successive jockey championships, and the following season he rode 8 of the 24 winners at Royal Ascot. Although Lester was Noel Merlis's retained jockey, there was no formal contract between them, just a tacit understanding, which the racing world regarded as having an air of permanency. However, in 1965, only 28 of Lester's 160 winners were trained by Noel Merlis, and many of his best winning rides were coming from outside stables and often at the expense of a fellow jockey. This was something that would fuel controversy throughout his career.
That was Lester, wasn't it? Nobody else can do it. Nobody else can get away with it. He's such a legend. People allowed him to do it. People were pleased for him to do it. He's treaded on a lot of toes, but they still had him back.
The horse that precipitated the split between Lester and Sir Noel Merlis was the Irish 1,000 guineas heroine Valoris, trained by Vincent O'Brien. Lester's decision to accept the ride on Valoris in preference to the Sir Noel Merlis trained Varinia cast him as the villain of the affair.
I think, as often happens, the press blew it into a matter of loyalties, and but I don't think it ever really was. I mean, Lester had every right to be loyal to himself because, you know, he put so much into this business that he's entitled to what he gets out of it, you know. And for Lester, again, it goes back to the question, what excites him? Riding the best horses excites Lester, and his only way of doing that was by being freelance and being exactly as he was. If a better ride came up the day of the race and he could get off the one he was already booked for, it never entered his mind, oh, I can't do that. And as far as Lester was concerned, he should do it, you know.
Lester's decision to ride Valoris looked likely to backfire when he was beaten on 2 O'Brien favourites in the Derby and the Coronation Cup. Furthermore, there was one aspect of Valoris that might prevent her from justifying favouritism.
She was a little strange insofar as when she hit the front, she suddenly would look around, and if she saw anything anywhere in her vicinity, she'd sort of duck away from it. I did say to Lester, when you do hit the front, just be sure you catch a good hold of her, because with the crowds and cheering and that, she might easily start to duck around. And he caught her up and she went on, and she won very easily.
10 years later, Lester would still be riding winners for Sir. He rode 23 for him in 1976. But in 1967, Lester decided to go freelance and laid the foundation to a partnership between 2 men who were regarded as supreme masters of their craft.
He was invaluable. His advice mattered for so much, because he really thought about horses and their temperament and their liking for different kinds of ground and idiosyncrasies, and maybe on the day after riding a horse he wouldn't say anything, but perhaps a week or 2 later when I met him again, he'd make some comment about that particular horse, which would be absolutely to the point, and in that way he was a tremendous help. He really thought about horses he rode, especially of course the good ones, and the bad ones too, not so good.
When horses from the Mercer stable won the 1,000 guineas, 2,000 guineas and the Derby in 1967, it looked as though Lester could well regret leaving Warren Place. Some consolation came when a horse that he had been second on in the Derby, Rebo, lined up for the St. Leger, where the principal rival was Hopeful Venture from the all-conquering Noel Mercer stable.
Inside the 2 furlong marker now, and it's the Italian Rysdale who's just in front of Dartford on the far side, Hopeful Venture on this side, and now Lester Piggott's really getting to work on Roberto. As they come to the final furlong, it's Hopeful Venture coming up now to challenge Rysdale, and Roberto on this side, but it's still Rysdale. Now Roberto has come on, and it's Roberto in front with 100 yards to go. It's Roberto clear of Hopeful Venture, Rysdale and Dartford at the post. Roberto is the winner.
Any disappointment Lester may have felt during the early part of the season was being dispelled in an autumn avalanche of winners. The most significant of these was at Longchamp, a month after the St. Leger, when he rode a horse called Sir Ivor in one of France's top 2-year-old races, the Grand Criterium. Sir Ivor was trained by Vincent O'Brien, and the ease of his 3-length victory set up an intriguing confrontation the following year with the unbeaten Patingo. Patingo was trained by Lester's father-in-law, Sam Armstrong, and as Lester had ridden Patingo in all his 2-year-old races, it was widely assumed that family ties would bind him to the horse in 1968. But the Maestro picked Sir Ivor in the 2,000 guineas, and Joe Mercer took over on Patingo.
I went down and rode him work, and he was very impressive to the horse, great galloper. And I rode him in a race prior to the 2,000 guineas at Newmarket, which he won by a street. And I thought, I've got a great chance of winning the guineas, and Lester said, I'll win. And when the actual day came, gained down Bushy's Hill. I was going real good on Patingo, and Lester just sort of swooped up sides of me, took one look at me, and off he went. He's a very, very good horse driver.
Vincent O'Brien had trained his first 2,000 guineas winner and become only the second Irish trainer to do so. Next on Sir Ivor's agenda was the Derby, and, as is so often the case with any horse that shows brilliant speed, there was always the danger that the extra distance could be too far, making Lester's task that much more difficult.
We didn't know whether he would, at that time, whether he'd get a mile and a half or not. And he rode him exactly like that. He held him up, and because he had tremendous confidence in the horse and the speed that the horse possessed. And I remember I was sitting beside the late Bull Hancock, who came over to see him run, and who bought him incidentally as a yearling at Keeneland. And about 2 furlongs out, a little less, he put his glasses down and he said, well, he can't win. No, there's no way to win. And in fact, he won without an effort. Lester just, he had him in behind another and just switched him out and went by as if they were walking.
The favourites line back in 6th place. Sir Ivor had never run this distance before, and either stamina to bring him through. Well, here it comes. On the outside, nearest camera, Lester Piggott and Sir Ivor begin that astonishing finishing burst. On past Romand and Mount Athos, on past the valiant Connaught, almost as if he'd grown wings like Pegasus, Sir Ivor flies to the post.
There was a feeling amongst the Derby crowd that this was an exceptional Derby and a performance from the winning horse and jockey that might never be surpassed. But 4 weeks after Epsom, Lester was responsible for Sir Ivor's downfall in the Irish Derby. O'Brien had an arrangement whereby Liam Ward rode his horses in Ireland. Lester was engaged by Fulk Johnson Horton to ride another Rebo colt, Ribeiro, a full brother to the previous year's winner Rebo, and in the same ownership of Charles Engelhard. The stiffer mile and a half exposed Sir Ivor's stamina limitations, and Ribeiro won by 2 lengths. Ribeiro then went for the St. Leger and a unique family double, where his main opposition appeared to be Connaught, who had been second to Sir Ivor in the English Derby. In the event, it was a horse called Canterbury and Bill Williamson who threw down the challenge in the final furlong. Lester, for once, couldn't use his great strength in the tight finish, as Fulk Johnson Horton recalls.
The problem with Ribeiro in the St. Leger was that he had an abscess came up in his mouth, and it was extremely painful. And Lester couldn't really touch his mouth at all. And he rode a brilliant race. And I don't think he really hardly touched the reins at all. I don't think anybody but Lester would have won on Roberto and St. Leger. He had a great relationship with him.
And coming out now to the outside, and Roberto is right on the heels of Connaught there, and Canterbury is close up there now. Ribacari has dropped out of it with a quarter of a mile to go. It's alignment now coming on. Alignment is the leader. Connaught has dropped back beaten. Ribeiro is coming up on this side with a furlong and a half to go. It's Lester Piggott and Roberto, tracked by Canterbury, Alignment, Cold Storage and Connaught. And as they come to the final furlong, it's Roberto from Canterbury. Roberto and Canterbury coming right away now from Alignment and Cold Storage, and it looks like Lester Piggott and Roberto with Canterbury coming up and challenging very strongly indeed on this side. As they come up to the line, it's a desperately close thing, and I think Roberto just held off Canterbury by a very short head with Cold Storage.
Charles Engelhard's obsession with Rebo horses was paying dividends, although in 1969 his Rebo colt, Reba Filio, widely considered a victim of dopers, had the dubious distinction of being a beaten favourite in 4 classics. But it was Engelhard's belief in the Rebo line which resulted in him owning one of the best racehorses there's ever been. Engelhard asked Vincent O'Brien to go to Canada to inspect a Rebo colt bred by E.P. Taylor. Instead, O'Brien recommended the purchase of a colt from the second crop of the Kentucky Derby winner, Northern Dancer. The colt was Nijinsky, and after an unbeaten 2-year-old career consisting of 5 victories, including England's noted 2-year-old race, the Dewhurst Stakes, he was installed as a hot winter favourite for the 2,000 guineas. The only danger to Nijinsky and a brilliant 3-year-old career appeared to be his temperament. Indeed, at one stage, Engelhard had been warned that he might be too unmanageable to train. It was crucial, therefore, that he was handled by the very best on the home gallops and on the racecourse.
It just made all the difference. Lester was as concerned as I was about the horse, and getting him to the post as relaxed as possible, and got off him at the start and walked around again, trying to leave no stone unturned. He told me when the horse had finished racing, he said, well, he was always anxious and concerned until he actually had jumped out of the stalls. And he said after that, then he was happy, and he said he dropped a bit, and he said he could put him anywhere he wanted in a race.
On the day of the 2,000 guineas, the prospects of Nijinsky's opponents was best encapsulated by the Sporting Life's headline, "Who's going to be second to Nijinsky?"
And with 2.5 furlongs to go now, as they come up to the bushes, it's Yellow God on the rails, Nijinsky cruising up beside him with Amber Armour on the outside, coming under pressure. Huntercombe is running on quite well on the far side, but with a quarter mile to go as they run down into the dip, it's Nijinsky coming through almost on a tight rein from Yellow God on this side, then Amber Armour, then Huntercombe, Joshua running on strongly on the far side. They're coming up the hill out of the dip now, and it's Nijinsky from Yellow God, but no danger whatever to the favourite, just having to be shaken up. Nijinsky from Yellow God, Amber Armour, Roi Soleil running on, might be third at the post. Nijinsky's the winner, Yellow God second, Roi Soleil third, then Amber Armour, Joshua Huntercombe.
If Lester had been confident about his chance in the 2,000 guineas, then he was equally so about the prospect of a Newmarket double. He'd written a filly called Humble Duty for Peter Warwin in Newbury's Fred Darling Stakes, a race which, although she hadn't won, clearly delighted her connections.
I said, look, Lester, get as close as you can, win if you can, place if you can, but for goodness sake, don't give her a race, because if she has a hard race, so many fillies in the spring of the year go backwards after a hard race, and if she has a hard race, I think we'll leave the guineas behind. And Lester went into the last furlong on a tight rein with Highest Hopes, who beat him, I think, a length. Neither animal was under the stick, but I didn't want them to be, or certainly my filly to be. And I was through with her. I said to Lester, will you ride her in the guineas? And he said, I'll let you know tonight. So he rang me that evening, he said, yes, I'll definitely ride her. And I said, what do you think? He said, I think she'll win.
And now Humble Duty looking for an opening and being switched to the outside. 2.5 furlongs to go, and it's Obelisk now coming through as Highest Hopes drops out. Highest Hopes has dropped out, and now Humble Duty. Lester Piggott has burst through on Humble Duty and running down into the dip. It's Humble Duty coming right away from Gleam, Black Satin, Obelisk, Farfalla and Caprera, and with 100 yards to go, it's another classic for Lester Piggott with Humble Duty coming right away from Gleam in second.
Humble Duty's margin of victory, 7 lengths, had been bettered only once in the history of the race, and Lester looked destined for a glorious summer of classic success. The Derby looked a mere formality for Nijinsky, yet, on the very eve of the race itself, Nijinsky showed symptoms of colic.
Well, naturally, of course, I was very, very worried about it. And I rang up my great friend over the years, Bob Griffin, my vet. He said I would give him some bicarb of soda. He reckoned there was a slight stomach upset the horse had. And he said a little grass, and he said walk him out in the afternoon and give me a ring again in the evening, let me know if he has had any further trouble in the meantime. So I called him in the evening. He said that the horse didn't have a recurrence, so he said, go and have a good big drink for yourself now. He said, don't worry.
Just in behind Nijinsky is Stintino making ground, Gears towards the outside.
The anxiety was soon dispelled in a race in which Lester had merely to wave his magic wand at Nijinsky to create instant response.
As they race round the home turn now, and it's Long Till, Meadowville, then comes Montplaisir, Gier with his white face showing towards the outside as they come to the 3 furlong marker. It's Meadowville in the centre with Long Till on the far side and Gier coming there very strongly. Great Wall has burst through over on the far side. Stintino's making a run towards the near side, and it's Great Wall under pressure from Gier. Gier now has taken it up at the 2 furlong pole. It's Gier under pressure in the lead, being pressed by Great Wall. Then comes Nijinsky and then Stintino. They're racing up towards the furlong marker, and here comes Lester Piggott on Nijinsky. It's Gier on the far side, Lester Piggott on the near side on Nijinsky. Nijinsky coming to take it up from Gier and racing up towards the line. It's a miss for Lester Piggott. Nijinsky's gone clear. Nijinsky's the winner. Gier is second. Stintino's third.
The time of the race very nearly equalled the record that Mahmoud had set in 1936, and coincidentally, Nijinsky's time would be improved 12 years later by one of his sons, Golden Fleece. Nijinsky, though, was not to escape illness, and after brilliant victories in the Irish Derby and King George, he was laid low by a virulent form of ringworm. Charles Engelhard was very keen to win the Triple Crown, but there was no way of knowing what effect the ringworm may have had. Furthermore, on the day of the race, there was drama of a more human kind.
In the days of Nijinsky, Lester was riding a horse for me called Leander that also belonged to Mr. Engelhard. And Leander was always a slightly awkward customer. He used to buck very badly, and he got rid of a lot of the boys here and people in his time. But on that particular day, he was running in the race before the St. Leger and was a hot favourite for it. And as they came out of the starting stalls, he gave a great buck and unshipped Lester and disappeared and galloped off loose. What I luckily didn't know was everybody was in a terrible state of excitement because apparently there'd been a lot of threats that Lester would get shot if he won the Triple Crown and won on Nijinsky. Naturally, when the people that were in the know saw him disappear off the back of Leander, they were absolutely terrified and thought that somebody had actually shot him coming out of the stalls.
With 2.5 furlongs to go, it's Politico on the rails. Charlton is with him. Nijinsky now just coming out, and at the moment Lester hasn't asked him anything at all. With 2 furlongs to go, Politico on the far rails. Charlton losing his place. Nijinsky cruising up on the outside, as smooth as silk. With 1.5 furlongs to go, it's Nijinsky cruising into the lead from Politico, and followed by Meadowville now in 3rd place, and then Charlton. 150 yards to go, and this great horse striding home Nijinsky from Meadowville, challenging strongly on this side. Politico on the far side. At the post, it's Nijinsky the winner. Meadowville second.
Lester was the first jockey to have ridden a horse to Triple Crown glory since Joe Childs on Gainsborough in 1918, when all the classics were run at Newmarket. Nijinsky retired with his record sadly partially tarnished by a defeat in the Arc and Champion Stakes, and the following season, 1971, was very much the year of Brigadier Gerard and Mill Reef. Nevertheless, Lester returned to Doncaster and the St. Leger for a ride on the Tom Jones-trained Athens Wood. The race may have lacked the appeal of the previous year, but it produced a finish that was a fight all the way to the line.
Far side, 3 furlongs to go, and Lester Piggott pushing on a little bit now on Athens Wood and showing just clear of Alderney. Falkland running on the far side. Frascati, Homeric, Veldrag and Guillemot all coming up on the stand side. At the 2 furlong marker, Lester Piggott has gone clear on Athens Wood. It's Athens Wood now showing in front. Homeric is coming at him hard, and it's Athens Wood from Homeric with Veldrag running on strongly on this side as they come to the final furlong. It's Athens Wood on the far side from Homeric. Falkland, Veldrag, Frascati, Alderney dropping back now, and with just 100 yards to go, it looks like another St. Leger for Athens Wood, very strongly challenged by Homeric and Falkland. At the post, Athens Wood is the winner.
The margin of victory was ahead, and months later, Lester, as had been the case with Sir Ivor in 1967, was on a mission to Longchamp and the Grand Criterium to ride a very smart O'Brien 2-year-old, Roberto. On this occasion, Lester finished 4th, but results would show that this was an exceptional race, for from the first 4 came the following season's winners of the Irish, French and English derbies. Even so, Roberto's performance, or perhaps his unwillingness to show his best at home, resulted in Lester committing himself to ride the best English colt, Crowned Prince, in the 2,000 guineas. Bill Williamson, or Weary Willie as he was known, was engaged to ride Roberto in the guineas. Roberto finished 2nd, and Crowned Prince was withdrawn after disappointing in the Craven Stakes. Lester then decided he would ride O'Brien's second string in the Derby, Manitoulin, for the wife of Roberto's owner and breeder, John Galbraith. Then, 12 days before the Derby, Bill Williamson was injured in a fall at Kempton, and although 49-year-old Weary Willie was past fit, John Galbraith insisted that Lester should ride Roberto, and should he win, Bill Williamson would still receive the equivalent winning percentage. It was a situation that was easily inflamed, with Lester less than justly cast in his familiar role as horse thief. Once again, though, he proved that at Epsom he was the master.
I suppose, you know, he gave so much thought to the riding, how best to ride each horse that he rode in the Derby, that he had no equal around Epsom. I don't remember Steve Donahue, but he was apparently a great jockey around Epsom too. But for me, in my time, Lester he was worth £7 on your horse.
Paper Cap running on the far side, Leafard running very, very wide, almost into the stands on the far side. 3 furlongs to go, and it's Pentland Firth running on strongly from Medimint, Ormindo, Manitoulin, Rheingold coming up on the outside. Roberto is there with a chance. Paper Cap and Our Mirage are running on, and so is Yarrowstar. With just under a quarter mile to go, it's Pentland Firth on the far side from Rheingold, Roberto, Medimint, Ormindo, Gombos and Yarrowstar, and now it's Rheingold and Roberto from Pentland Firth, who's a bit squeezed for room over on the far side, and as they run into the final furlong, it's Roberto and Rheingold nearest to us, Roberto over on the far side. They're running absolutely head for head, followed by Pentland Firth and Our Mirage, and at the post I think Lester Piggott has just forced Roberto's head in front of Rheingold.
Few were prepared to commit themselves as to whether Vincent O'Brien and Lester had won their third Derby in 5 years, or was it Barry Hills who had trained his first Classic winner.
My thoughts before the race that I rather wished that Williamson was still riding Roberto. But Rheingold was a pretty good horse. He didn't handle Epsom the previous time, and he ran the blue ribbon there very well on the course. And when he went into the last furlong, I was a good 3 parts up going to the last furlong, and my horse didn't handle the hill too well in camber. And possibly Ernie Johnson might have been better off giving my horse a quick smack and gambled on holding him to the line, but he thought he'd hold him hands and heels, really, and Lester got up and beat him on the line.
I was relying entirely on Lester and his great ability to get the horse's head in front on the post.
Although Lester's great strength may have made all the difference, Roberto might have produced more for another jockey, as Lester freely admitted.
That night he said to me, he said, you know, he wasn't doing much for me. So it is arguable that that the horse really was not putting in all he'd got towards the finish.
Consolation for Barry Hills and this narrowest of defeats would come the following season when Lester rode Rheingold to victory in the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. 1972, though, saw Lester deposed as champion jockey for the first time in 9 years, but not before he recorded an outstanding 5th St. Leger win out of the last 6 runnings. Not since Frank Buckle won 5 of 6 1,000 guineas 150 years previously had a jockey so dominated a classic race. The horse responsible was the Vincent O'Brien-trained Boucher. Once again, Barry Hills and his runner Our Mirage had to be satisfied with second place.
Racing towards the final 2 furlongs now, and it's Our Mirage 1, Boucher now 2, Ginevra running past a towering Steel Pulse, then comes Cara. They're well inside the final 2 furlongs that looks to be between Our Mirage and Boucher. Could this be another for Lester Piggott? A furlong and a half from home, and the crowd is going crazy here at Town Moor Doncaster with Our Mirage holding on grimly from Boucher. There's nothing between the two. This could be Athens Wood all over again, a narrow victory for Lester. I think it's going to be. Half a furlong left, and Lester riding for all his worth, his whip in his left hand. He's just got to win from Our Mirage. It's going to be close, but at the line, Boucher wins the St. Leger. Our Mirage is second.
Lester had to wait until 1975 before he rode his next Classic winner, a year when he was awarded an OBE, won a 6th Gold Cup at Royal Ascot, and rode 8 of the 24 winners at that meeting. Earlier in the season, Lester had won on 2 of Jeremy Tree's Oaks fillies, Brilliantine and Juliet Marnie. Jock Whitney's Brilliantine was the better regarded of the pair, but unsuited to firm going. Lester waited until the last possible moment before deciding which he would ride in the Classic.
In fact, the decision was left until the morning of the race, and Lester couldn't decide which he was going to ride. And I remember going to Epsom and walking around the course and deciding it was definitely on the firm side, but probably good enough to run Brilliantine. And ringing up Lester, who was in London, and saying, well, I am going to run them both, at which he tried to make me make the decision as which he was going to ride, but I wasn't having any of that, and I said, no, you've got to decide. And so he then said, well, I better ride Juliet Marney.
But they now head for home in the Oaks, and on towards the 3 furlong from home marker, and it's 1 over par, now being challenged by Harmonise. They're the leading 2. Juliet Marney now cruising right in behind the leaders, but they have 2.5 furlongs still to run, and it's Harmonise in the centre, 1 over par near Sorrells, and Lester Piggott trying hard to reduce Juliet Marney on the outside, the 2 leaders, and so that's a leading 3 with a furlong and a half to go, and it's Lester Piggott and Juliet Marney now gone into the lead from Harmonise. Val's Girl, Moonlight Night appears to have it all to do, and so on towards the final furlong, and it's Juliet Marney coasting away to a very easy victory here from Val's Girl. Moonlight Night with 100 yards to go. Another Oaks winner here for Lester Piggott as he comes up towards the line on Juliet Marney, who is the winner from Val's Girl, Moonlight Night. Then comes Mayhill in full.
A filly with whom Lester formed a marvellous partnership was Dahlia. He rode her to victory in the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Diamond Stakes and 2 Benson and Hedges Gold Cups. And it was for her owner, Nelson Bunker Hunt, and trainer Maurice Zilber, that Lester was engaged to ride Empéry in the 1976 Derby. Still looking for a first win of the season, Empéry appeared to have only an outside chance of giving his partner a record 7th Derby victory. Wallow, the unbeaten 2,000 guineas winner, and racing in the distinctive Carlo d'Alessio colours, was widely regarded as the star of his generation. Lester rode one of his typical Epsom races, always lying handy before making a decisive move. On this occasion, it was Joe Mercer who chased Lester home.
I rode Volcano for Major Home, Lady Beaverbrook. It was one of those races where I was always up there, virtually the first 2 the whole way. I thought I'd win with about 2 to go. Unfortunately, my horse didn't stay, and Lester soon swooped by and off he went and won.
As they do so, Petit still the leader, and he's tracked still by Radeski. Relkino right on the outside, Opry near Sorrells, and so they head for home, 3 furlongs still to go. And it's Gerard Rivas still in the lead with Petit. Then comes Relkino, the leading 2 are then pressed by Opry. Tierra Fuego tries to run on the outside, so too is Oates. And Wallow's under pressure, and so they have 2 furlongs still to run. And it's Relkino and Joe Mercer in the lead now from Petit. And then comes Opry in 3rd place, Oates is 4th. Then comes Hawkesbury, and Waller making a tremendous hard work of it, but he's not going to get to them because they've now come towards the final furlong. And it's Lester Piggott on Opry now takes up from Relkino. Then comes Overton on the far side of the team. They've got about 150 yards to go, and it's Lester Piggott. He's done it again on Opry. They come up towards the line. Opry wins the Derby from Relkino. Oates, Hawkesbury, Wallow in 5th.
It had been 5 years since Lester had ridden a Classic winner for Vincent O'Brien. In the meantime, a new influence had joined the partnership, Robert Sangster, and in 1976, the investment he had made in Bloodstock looked as though it was bearing fruit. His 2-year-old chestnut colt with 4 white socks and a pedigree similar to Nijinsky was showing all the potential of a future Classic winner. But as a 3-year-old, the Minstrel was first defeated in the English Guineas and then at the Curragh in the Irish 2,000 Guineas, where a discussion of far-reaching consequence took place.
After racing was over, and Lester had ridden in the last, I went in to have a talk with him about Epsom and what his thinking was. So he said, look, he said, if you run the Minstrel, he said, I'll ride him. I said, that's fine with me. So I went out and I met Robert Sangster and I told him, and we were delighted that, but he must have figured, you know, that day that the horse was most unlucky to lose the Guineas, and also that that the horse would get a mile and a half.
Such was O'Brien's and Sangster's confidence in Lester's decision that on the very eve of the race they turned down £1 million offer for their Derby hope. But in a desperate finish, there must have been several anxious moments as Hot Grove, a horse Lester had ridden to victory in the Derby trial at Chester, set sail for home, driven by a young Scot, eager for his first Derby victory.
When he come and picked me on Hot Grove, the Minstrel, I thought I was home. I could see the jam stick. Oh, it was only just there. Got me. He gave it a great ride that day because I think I rode a very good race because I was on a horse who stayed the trip really well. I kicked very early, got away from the field, and he set sail after me, a bit late maybe, but he just got there. He gave it a terrific ride.
They run down into the turn now with just over 3 furlongs to run in the Derby, and it's $1 Million Man being pressed by Hot Grove. The Minstrel coming there in 3rd place. Then comes Be My Guest making progress. Behind them, Blushing Groom on the outside, unleashing a run. Behind him is Monseigneur. They're coming to the 2 furlong marker. It's Hot Grove from the Minstrel, then Blushing Groom, and Monseigneur still making rapid progress towards the stand side. But it's Hot Grove from the Minstrel and Blushing Groom. Then Monseigneur moving into 4th. They're racing into the closing stages now. And it's Hot Grove from the Minstrel, Blushing Groom and Monseigneur. 100 yards to run in the Derby. The Minstrel coming to challenge Hot Grove. And it's Lester Piggott and Willie Carson. The Minstrel on the near side, Hot Grove on the north side, and the Minstrel wins it from Hot Grove. Blushing Groom is 3rd.
The Minstrel went on to reap a golden harvest, adding the Irish Derby and the King George to his tally of victories. Later in 1977, Lester rode a ledge to the first of 2 Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, and so firmly established Robert Sangster as a dominant force in British bloodstock. 3 years later, though, Lester was back at Newmarket. The strain of continual travel to Ireland at the age of 45 was beginning to tell, and so he accepted a retainer with Henry Cecil and thus returned to Warren Place. One of Cecil's best prospects for 1981 was a filly called Fairy Footsteps, but a week before the 1,000 guineas, Lester was involved in a horrific accident at Epsom when he was dragged under the starting stalls. Despite nearly losing an ear and severely bruising his ribs, there never seemed to be any question that he wouldn't be wearing the famous Jim Joel colours on the day. Dictating the pace from the start, Lester needed all his strength to record his 24th classic victory.
And with just over 3 furlongs to go, it's Fairy Footsteps in the lead from Ptolemy, Vocalist, and then up on the outside, What Heaven, Marwell just in behind these. Then comes Go Leasing and Greciancy on the far side. Just over 2 furlongs to go, Fairy Footsteps from Vocalist with Ptolemy making up ground. Then comes Marwell making a run, and then in behind these comes Kitty Hawk, switch to the outside. A furlong and a half to go, Fairy Footsteps has the advantage. Ptolemy in 2nd place, Marwell 3rd, Vocalist 4, Kitty Hawk 5, then What Heaven 6. Inside the final furlong, and Fairy Footsteps has the advantage, but Ptolemy is challenging strongly. Fairy Footsteps from Ptolemy, then Marwell and Vocalist and Go Leasing coming well inside the final 50 yards. It's Fairy Footsteps holding on from Ptolemy. Fairy Footsteps a winner, Ptolemy in 2nd, then Go Leasing in 3rd. Then behind
Fairy Footsteps didn't train on for the Oaks, but Lester was asked by Dermot Well to replace Walter Swinburne's father, Wally, on his entry, Blue Wind. Once again, the Maestro of Epsom knew exactly when to make the decisive move that would give him one of his easiest classic victories.
And it's Leap Lively in the lead. Leap Lively in the lead and clear from Madam Gay in 2nd place. Then Blue Wind is in 3rd. Just over 3 furlongs to go. Leap Lively from Madam Gay with Blue Wind coming with a strong run. And with 2.5 furlongs to go, Leap Lively coming back to her field. Madam Gay and Blue Wind making up ground on the outside. Just over 2 furlongs to go, and it's Blue Wind now who's come through to take it up. Blue Wind and Lester Piggott setting sail for home from Madam Gay in 2nd place. Leap Lively beaten back in 3rd. A furlong and a half to go, and it's Blue Wind in the lead from Madam Gay in 2nd place. Leap Lively, who made the early running, now towering in 3rd place and coming inside the final furlong. Lester Piggott on Blue Wind in the lead and clear from Madam Gay, going up towards the line. Blue Wind's going to win it, coming up towards the line. Blue Wind in the lead at the line. Blue Wind the winner, and Madam Gay is 2nd, and Leap Lively is going to be 3rd.
Lester's great ability to choose the right horse for the big occasion was no more evident than in the wet spring of 1983. With no Henry Cecil-trained horse in the Derby, Lester was offered several mounts, one of whom was Tinoso, trained at Newmarket by Jeff Ragg, who'd just taken over the stable from his father Harry. Lester had never ridden Tinoso in a race, but he knew the prevailing soft ground conditions would be very much in his favour, and so it proved, giving Jeff Ragg a first-season Derby success.
I turned round to the wife and I said, the way he's going now, I said he's going to trot up. And that was at the top of the hill, you know. And I think even sort of coming round Tattenham, he had time to sort of have a chat with one of the jockeys, and who it was, he turned around and said, "You'll let me out, won't you, when I want to go," sort of. And he actually rode a fantastic race on horse. He always had him very well placed. In fact, all through the race he was going better than anything. Really was no problem at all at any time through the race. You know, when you let him go, he's gone, and that was it.
And it's Mizzolini from Tinoso, Lester Piggott on Tinoso, committed and goes for home. And it's Tinoso, Lester Piggott with 2.5 furlongs to go. Tinoso in the lead from Mizzolini in second place. Then comes Neoria, Guns of Navarone is staying on. Then comes Salmon Leap, but Lester Piggott with 2.5 furlongs to go is clear on Tinoso, 2 furlongs to go. And Tinoso clear from Guns of Navarone second, Carling for Castle is third. Then comes Salmon Leap unbeaten but in fourth place. Then Sheer Walk, 1.5 furlongs to go. And Lester Piggott in the lead. Carling for Castle is chasing in second place. And well inside the final half furlong. Lester Piggott coming home on his 9th Derby winner, Tinoso, from Carling for Castle in second place. Coming up towards the line. Tinoso's going to win it from Carling for Castle. Tinoso the winner, Carling for Castle second. A photo for third between...
It was Leicester's 9th and easiest Derby victory, and the following season he gave an inspired performance on Tinoso to win the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Diamond Stakes. Frank Buckle's record of 27 classic victories was very much in sight, and Leicester's chance to equal it came when he was engaged by John Dunlop to ride Circus Plume in the 1984 Oaks. On a lady who needed a little humouring, he gave a demonstration of Piggott artistry at its most subtle.
Look at Leicester coming sweetly in through into fourth place, and it's Miss Bewley in the lead. Miss Bewley on the outside of Malark, then comes on the outside, finishing quite well, Rio Gold. Also with them is Circus Plume. Just over 1.5 furlongs to go, and it's Lester Piggott on Circus Plume who strikes the home from Miss Bewley in second place. Just over 1.5 furlongs to go, Circus Plume with Media Luna staying on most determinedly. Also coming with a strong one is Optimistic Glass, then Paquito Queen, but it's Lester Piggott bidding for his 27th classic from Media Luna. And Media Luna without a shot. Media Luna out of shot, and Circus Plume. Circus Plume's going to get there. A record 27th for Leicester. Circus Plume the winner. Media Luna is second out.
So Leicester had equalled the record which had stood for 157 years, and a few weeks after Epsom, Leicester rode a horse for Luca Cumani in the Gordon Stakes at Goodwood in place of Luca's stable jockey Darrell McHarg, who was serving a suspension. The ease of his victory established Comanche Run as a leading contender for the St. Leger. Loyalties were divided. Luca naturally wished to retain his stable jockey, but the colt's owner and a great friend of Leicester's, Ivan Allen, was equally keen for Leicester to be given what might be an historic ride.
I've never known him to ring me out in Singapore about a dozen times, and he really put the pressure on, you know. He called on friendship, he called on every reason he could think of. And his exact words to me was, you know, I want to break that record, and I don't think I'll be riding for much longer. So, you know, I really had no choice but to put Lester on. And for my own part, I wanted Lester myself because I felt Lester went very well for the horse. And, I mean, you know, over the St. Leger distance and St. Leger course, there's nobody better than Lester.
But Comanche Run goes on 4 out. Could this be too soon? Just in behind him comes Baynoon. Chernazar is improving. The French horse is 2 from the left of the picture. And the race really develops with 3 to go. And it's Lester Piggott who looks around. He sees Chernazar and Walter Swinburne and Baynoon as his main challengers. Alpha Beta is under pressure. So too is Crazy. They've got 2.5 to go. Comanche Run joined by Baynoon and Chernazar. Then Alpha Beta and Crazy. Only 5 in the Leger. And with just 1.5 furlongs to go, it's Comanche Run who leads. Comanche Run, Lester Piggott, with Baynoon throwing down the challenge on his outside. Lester Piggott and Steve Cortland, and up on the outside, Walter Swinburne on Chernazar. 1 furlong to go. Comanche Run and Baynoon. Comanche Run and Baynoon. Comanche Run from Baynoon and Crazy. Well inside the final furlong, and it's Lester Piggott going on. This one for the record, the 28th Classic, as Comanche Run wins the Leger from Baynoon, second out for Baynoon.
At the age of 49, Lester had made history, and on this occasion, even he was moved by a sense of achievement.
Lester rang me up after the race, and he said, thank you. So he doesn't normally do that. You know, you wait for your call. So it was very nice. I think he was very pleased too.
Those that might have expected Lester to retire now that he had achieved his goal were once again proved wrong, and the following year the Maestro was right back in the reckoning for classic glory when he was engaged by Luca Cumani to ride Sheikh Mohammed's Bairn in the 2,000 guineas. At that time, Walter Swinburne was due to ride Shadid for Sheikh Mohammed's brother, Maktoum al-Maktoum, but Walter was suspended and Michael Stout had to find a replacement.
When Walter Swinburne was suspended for the 2,000 guineas, I thought, you know, nobody had an understanding with the Northern Dancer horses like Lester did. But it was a difficult situation because he was engaged to ride Sheikh Mohammed's horse. So really the ball was put into the court of the Maktoum family, although, of course, I did want him to ride Shadid.
It's perhaps fitting that Lester should have been given the chance to conclude his classic triumphs on a son of Nijinsky, one of the greatest horses he had ever ridden.
As they come to the point just over 2 from home, Shadid kicks and goes, so it's Lester Piggott in the lead. Lester Piggott on Shadid, the leader, from Bairn in second place, Pacific Gold, then comes Supreme Leader, Bassenthwaite trying to get into top tier to close, they've got a furlong and a half to go, and it's Lester Piggott on Shadid in the lead from Bairn, the horse he could have ridden up on the outside, but Lester gives Willie a look round there, and Lester has to shake up Shadid as Bairn throws down the challenge. Supreme Leader is back in third, and coming inside the final furlong with Shadid, but Bairn is staying on very strongly up on the outside. Shadid and Bairn from Supreme Leader down the centre of the track. Shadid could just win this, going up towards the line. Shadid's going to win it. Shadid from Bairn in a photo. Supreme Leader third, then Bassenthwaite fourth.
Although there was to be no further classic glory in 1985, not on English soil anyway, Lester continued to display his matchless skill, winning the French Oaks on Lifarita in a breathtaking finish and scoring notable victories on a horse who was to take high place in his affection, Comanche Run. As a long-time observer of the international racing scene and an unashamed hero worshipper, I've always avoided comparisons whenever possible. But I have to say, with firm conviction, you'll never see a greater jockey than Lester Keith Piggott.
If you notice, you never see him crowding a horse. He's never sat over the top of a horse. He always just sat back. His backside's in the air, he arches his back. But he's never laid over the top of the ears, you know. He allows the horse to race.
He really is a great horseman, and I think probably his greatest asset is probably his great racing brain.
He's always been able to have the knack of picking the right horse, which is a great advantage, and he's obviously a very good judge at it.
And he undoubtedly was a great judge of pace. He kept horses wonderfully well balanced, and he was just a sort of great natural jockey.
I think he'll always be remembered because of his tremendous record and his, you know, and the amount of classics he's won and all the other races.
Lester will never change. You know, he always rides how he thinks it should be ridden, and if it's not good enough, well, it doesn't work.
I think all his performances in the Derby of Leicester's have been tremendous. You know, he always seems to be in the right place at the right time. He's a great judge of a classic horse.
He was always looking round him in races, and he knew next time exactly what the opposition would be like. He was a marvellous judge of form.
Well, simply that he's a genius.